up, guys? This is Hatsme, and I'm coming to you with a brand new episode of Why I Love This Card, and today we are doing Spell Shattering Arrow. Now, this card has been seeing quite a bit of meta play at the moment, and that's because it is a very, very good card against Pendulums. If you don't know what this card does, it is a quick play spell card. It allows you to destroy all face-up spell cards your opponent controls, and for each destroyed spell card, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So, essentially, it is a non-searchable version of Wavering Eyes for decks that don't use Pendulums, and it's very useful for putting some damage on board. It's great for outpacing Wavering Eyes, and it's a really funny way to end games against Pendulum decks. Now, obviously, as I said, this is a great defense against Pendulums. Performapals are still a thing. Magicians are still a thing. Even Magispectors are kind of relevant. This deck just eats them alive. Like, this card eats them alive just because they need their scales. The one thing about Magicians, though, is that they do have Pendulum Call, and that prevents them from being destroyed for the turn that they're activated, as well as the turn following that, like the opponent's turn. So that, just be aware of that. Magicians do have that ability to get around this card at some point. However, Draco-pals don't have that utility nearly as much, and Magispectors certainly do. They even have a field spell card which can be used by them, and that card obviously is not limited to just Pendulums, it's also limited to other spell cards, can destroy that as well. This is also Rex Dynamis. Dynamis uses a continuous spell card called Dynamis Charge. A couple people are not like necessarily afraid, are minorly concerned / annoyed by this card, by this deck, because if they establish a board, it's very hard to break it because they offer a lot of protection from their scales, and they swarm very easily. Plus, they're one of the few decks that can make Cyber Dragon Infinity at the moment as their engine. There's an engine that is used from the Dynamist archetype to make Infinity in other decks. But Dynamist Charge is a key card to the deck, as well as their Pendulum Scales. And Dynamist Charge, if this card is destroyed by Spell Shattering Arrow, then the deck kind of falls apart. The one thing against that is that obviously they can pop one of their own scales, the one that prevents destruction of Dynamist cards in general, and just sacrifice that. But if you have two Spell Shattering Arrows, then that can get around that, so that's the problem with that. Another deck this is actually really good against is Monarchs. Monarchs play 3 different types of spell cards that stay on the field. They play Domain, which is the field spell, and the key card of the deck that keeps the opponent in check and in lock. If you don't know what this does, it prevents the opponent essentially from special summoning from the extra deck while they control a tribute summon a monster, which is really easy for them. March of the Monarchs. Not a lot of Monarch players use this card. However, it basically provides some sort of protection. And they also use Return of the Monarchs for some searching power. Also, if they are using the Super Quantum build, and they have the field spell out for Super Quantums, which is the key card in getting their combo off, that is a field spell card, and that can be destroyed by Spell Shattering Arrow before the effect goes off. So, in that case, this card is very, very good against this deck, and you could get like basically a double whammy for Monarchs and for Pendulum decks, but just by siding in 3 of these cards. This is also good against Psyframes. Psyframes are sort of still relevant, more or less. They're like, a lot of people don't like playing this deck because you have to wait for your opponent to do something in order to play, and it really sucks to play against this deck because the whole theme of the deck is just to stop everything you do. If Psyframe Circuit is very much key to this deck, the field spell is definitely needed in order to really take advantage of special summoning during the opponent's turn. So if you can get rid of this, that's actually really useful. Just be aware that this card, Spell Shattering Arrow, is not good against Cosmotown. Cosmotown is really the only continuous or field spell card that Cosmos really utilize. Popping this card on their or at any point, especially on their turn, is not a good idea. Because, one, they can just replace it again with Cosmotown. The only really relevance this has against them is that it deals damage. And if you're trying to end the game, yeah, do it. But in general, I personally would never side this in against Cosmos, because they can search off a Cosmo, they can get another Cosmotown just straight off of that, or they can get something else. Like, if, for example, if in a scenario where the opponent activates the Cosmotown effect to shuffle cards back in their hand, You can shuffle those cards back in your hand, get a whole new hand, and if you pop the Cosmo Town in retaliation or something, they get it like a free farm girl, and then boom, they can do whatever they want. So this is kind of, they can shuffle cards back in the deck again by adding another Cosmo Town back to their hand. So this is not a good card against Cosmo Town. It's also not a good card against Kaijus. Kaijus play a lot of back row to support themselves. The only continuous or field spell card they play is Kyoto Waterfront in general. And Kyoto Waterfront is really hard to get rid of. You need them to use their counters before you can get rid of Waterfront. And even then, they still have cards like Gamma Seal that can protect them. Typically, they don't really steal back the Gamma Seal, but if they are given the option, sometimes they will anyway, just so they can attack you with it. Kyoto Waterfront, if you don't know, you can just remove a Kaiju counter from it and it won't get destroyed. And that can actually work to their benefit a lot of the time. For example, if your opponent gave you a Gamma Seal and they have 3 counters, like they have 2 counters on board, and then you activate Spell Shattering Arrow in retaliation, all it does is get rid of the 1 Kaiju counter that is on this card, and then you cannot activate Gamma Seal's effect, which is to banish a card straight up. And that's pretty awesome. You don't want to do that. And I would wait until they activate a card, activate Gamma Seal's effect, and then pop the Waterfront with Spell Shattering Arrow. You have to play around it, which sucks. So not the best card to side in against Waterfront. So that is it for this episode of Why I Love This Card. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week. And of course, guys, have a nice day.